The morning air was crisp, carrying a faint smell of damp leaves and the distant sound of cars humming along the quiet street. The small coffee shop on the corner had just opened, and the bell above the door jingled as a few early risers stepped inside, rubbing sleep from their eyes and warming their hands around steaming cups of coffee. Inside, the shop smelled of fresh bread, strong coffee, and a faint hint of cinnamon. The walls were painted a soft cream color, with a few paintings hung carefully, giving the place a cozy, inviting feel. Clara had just started her shift. She tied her apron neatly around her waist and adjusted the small name tag pinned to her chest. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes, bright and attentive, scanned the shop as she prepared for the morning rush. She had worked here for a few years, and over time, she had become familiar with many of the regular customers. She remembered their orders, their little quirks, and sometimes even the small personal stories they shared while waiting for their coffee. Today, though, she had no idea that one ordinary morning would be different, that it would start a chain of events that would change lives. The door opened again, letting in a rush of cold air. An elderly man stepped inside, his coat buttoned tightly against the chill. His hat was worn, slightly frayed at the edges, and his shoes carried the soft scuff of years of walking. He moved slowly, carefully, as if every step had to be deliberate. Clara noticed him right away. There was something gentle in the way he carried himself, a quiet dignity that didn't need attention but still drew it. He approached the counter, eyes flicking around the room before settling on the menu. He pulled a small coin purse from his pocket and began counting coins, a few copper coins clinking softly as he tried to make them stretch to cover the price of a simple cup of coffee. Clara watched him from behind the counter, a gentle concern stirring in her heart. She could see the hesitation in his hands, the slight frown of worry as he tried to add up the coins. She stepped closer and smiled warmly. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice kind but cheerful. "What can I get for you today?" The man looked up, startled slightly by the friendly tone. He cleared his throat and said quietly, "Just a small coffee, please, black." Clara nodded, reaching for a cup. "Coming right up." As she prepared the coffee, she noticed him still counting coins, a slight frown on his face. It was then she realized he might not have enough to pay for it. Without thinking too much, she leaned slightly over the counter and said in a soft voice, "It's on me today, sir. You don't need to worry about paying." For a moment, he just stared at her. His eyes, a pale shade of blue, widened slightly in surprise. I can't," he said, shaking his head, his voice trembling just a little. "I should pay for it." "I don't want to take advantage," Clara shook her head gently. "No, really. It's okay. Consider it a small gift. I just want you to enjoy your coffee without worrying about the cost." He hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded slowly, a soft smile forming on his face. "Thank you," he said quietly, almost as if the words were not enough to express the gratitude he felt. Clara poured the coffee, the rich aroma filling the small space between them, and handed it over with a smile. As he took the cup in his hands, he looked around the shop, taking in the warm light, the soft chatter of the few customers, and the gentle hum of the coffee machines. He noticed the care Clara put into every small detail, the way she adjusted the sugar containers, the way she straightened the napkins, the way her eyes met his with genuine warmth. There was something rare in her kindness, something that couldn't be bought or taught. It was effortless, natural. He took a small sip of the coffee, savoring the warmth as it spread through his hands and into his chest. The taste was simple yet comforting, much like the moment itself. Clara watched him quietly, feeling a small sense of satisfaction. She didn't need recognition or thanks. Seeing someone relieved even for a moment was reward enough. After a few minutes, the man set the cup down, taking a deep breath. "You have a kind heart," he said softly, his voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Clara blushed slightly, unused to being complimented in such a sincere way. "Thank you, sir. I just try to do my best," she replied simply, unaware of how deeply her actions had touched him. The man smiled again and took a seat near the window, gazing out at the street. Cars passed slowly, and a few pedestrians hurried along carrying umbrellas against the faint drizzle that had started outside. Clara returned to the counter, attending to other customers, but her eyes kept glancing toward him, curious about his quiet presence. There was something about him that felt different, though she couldn't place it. He wasn't wealthy-looking, at least not in any obvious way. Yet there was an air about him, a subtle confidence mixed with humility, that made him stand out from the others. Throughout the morning, more customers came and went, the coffee shop filling with the soft murmur of conversations, laughter, and the occasional sound of the espresso machine. Clara moved gracefully between tasks, her energy steady despite the rush. She poured coffees, handed out pastries, and smiled at the customers, making small talk where she could. Yet she never missed a chance to check on the elderly man, who sat quietly by the window, occasionally sipping his coffee and observing the world outside. As the morning progressed, the man's quiet presence became a subtle part of the shop's atmosphere. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful, often carrying a gentle humor that made those nearby smile. Clara noticed the small way he interacted with the environment, how he helped a child pick up a fallen toy, how he gave a reassuring nod to a nervous new customer. She began to realize that there was more to him than met the eye, though she didn't yet understand the depth of his story. By mid-morning, the shop had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Clara wiped down the counters and glanced out the window, noticing the elderly man still sitting there, seemingly lost in thought. She wondered what his story was, imagining the decades of experiences that his eyes hinted at. There was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, a resilience that only life's challenges could forge. The bell above the door jingled again, and a few more customers came in, but Clara's attention remained partly with him. There was a moment when their eyes met, and she felt a strange connection, a silent acknowledgement of the kindness that had passed between them. It was as if, in that small gesture of paying for his coffee, something unspoken had been exchanged, something that went beyond words or money. It was a recognition of humanity, a small bridge of understanding built in the most ordinary of places. As the morning turned toward noon, the man finally stood to leave. He placed a few coins on the table, more out of habit than necessity, and nodded to Clara. "Thank you again," he said, his voice carrying the same quiet sincerity as before. Clara smiled and waved as he walked out the door, the bell jingling softly behind him. She watched him go, feeling a subtle warmth in her chest, unaware that the simple act of kindness she had extended was the beginning of a story far greater than the morning itself. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the pale sunlight that filtered through the clouds. The man walked slowly, savoring the moment, reflecting on the unexpected gesture of a stranger's kindness. In his heart he carried gratitude, not just for the coffee but for the reminder that there were still genuine, good-hearted people in the world. Little did he know, and little did Clara know, that this brief encounter would mark the start of a remarkable journey, one that would intertwine their lives in ways neither could have imagined, leading to moments of surprise, inspiration, and profound human connection. Clara returned to her work behind the counter, still unaware of the man's true identity. For her, it had been a simple, natural act, a small way to help someone without expecting anything in return. But the world has a way of noticing such acts even when we do not, and for that elderly man, her kindness would not be forgotten. It was a quiet morning in a small coffee shop, yet it carried within it the seeds of a story that would touch hearts and change lives, all beginning with a single cup of coffee and a simple choice to be kind. The following week, the coffee shop hummed with the same steady rhythm of life, the soft clatter of cups, the warm aroma of coffee, and the low murmur of conversation wrapping the space in a gentle, comforting blanket. Clara arrived early for her shift as usual, tying her apron with practiced precision and scanning the shop for anything that might need attention before the morning rush. She adjusted the tables, straightened the chairs, and made sure the counters gleamed under the soft morning light that filtered through the windows. The routine comforted her. It made her feel prepared, in control, and ready for whatever the day might bring. It was then that she noticed him again, the elderly man who had come in last week. He entered quietly, almost as if he didn't want to draw attention, yet there was a calm presence about him that naturally drew the eye. His coat, though simple, was neat, and his worn hat tilted slightly to one side. He walked slowly but with purpose, and when he reached the counter, Clara felt a familiar stir of curiosity and concern. Would he have enough for his coffee today, she wondered, or would she find another way to help like she had last time? As he approached, Clara smiled warmly. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle but bright. He returned the smile, a hint of recognition in his eyes. It wasn't a dramatic greeting, but there was a subtle connection, a silent acknowledgement of the brief kindness they had shared the previous week. He nodded, placing his coin purse on the counter and beginning to count carefully. Clara watched, her eyes soft with empathy. She could see the faint worry shadowing his face, the slight hesitation in his hands as he tried to make his coin stretch. Without a second thought, she leaned over and said, "It's okay, sir. I've got this today." For a moment he paused, and a shadow of surprise crossed his face. Then a small amused smile appeared, a twinkle in his eyes that Clara noticed but didn't fully understand. "You remember me?" he said softly. Clara nodded. "Of course. You're a regular now." She poured his coffee with care, adding just the right amount of cream as he liked it, even though he hadn't asked. There was something instinctive about it, a natural attention to detail that came from years of observing people and wanting to make their day a little better. The coffee was placed in front of him with a gentle smile, and he accepted it with quiet gratitude, the warmth from the cup seeping into his hands and heart alike. After a few moments, he moved toward the corner table by the window, taking a seat that gave him a view of the street outside. Clara continued her work, but she found herself stealing glances toward him whenever she could. There was something different about him this time. He wasn't just a quiet customer. He seemed to be studying the shop, observing the interactions, and noticing the subtle nuances that Clara sometimes took for granted. Throughout the week, Arthur, as his friends and family knew him, returned to the coffee shop regularly. Sometimes he came early, sometimes later, but he always chose a seat near the window. He observed with quiet patience, noting Clara's interactions with every customer. He watched how she remembered a regular's complicated order without hesitation, how she gently reassured a customer who had spilled coffee on themselves, how she took the time to smile at a child who had wandered in with a parent, shy and uncertain. Each small gesture struck a chord with him, revealing layers of her character that he hadn't anticipated. Clara, meanwhile, began to notice his quiet presence more distinctly. Unlike other customers, he didn't rush. He didn't check his watch, tap his fingers impatiently, or glance anxiously at his phone. He sat and absorbed the atmosphere, taking note of the little things. A child giggling over a spilled cookie, a young couple sharing a quiet conversation, a man struggling to tie his coat properly. There was a depth to his observation, an empathy that she sensed without fully understanding. She wondered about his story. What experiences had shaped the calm and thoughtful man she saw before her? She imagined decades of life, of joys and sorrows, achievements and losses, all condensed into the gentle demeanor that now occupied a corner of her everyday world. Arthur began to notice other details as well, the way she interacted with her co-workers, the soft camaraderie that passed between them, the small inside jokes, the way she lifted others' spirits without making it feel forced. It wasn't just kindness. It was understanding, awareness, and a natural inclination to make people feel valued. These qualities, he realized, were rare. He had traveled the world, met countless people, and yet few had the quiet strength and genuine warmth he saw in her. He found himself thinking about her, wondering how someone so young could carry such maturity and compassion. One rainy afternoon, the shop was quieter than usual. The drizzle outside painted the windows with tiny streams of water, and the muffled sound of traffic created a soft, rhythmic backdrop. Clara moved slowly, attending to a few customers who lingered over their drinks. Arthur sat in his usual spot sipping his coffee, watching as she checked in on each table, offering refills, listening patiently to stories, and responding with humor or empathy as the situation required. Finally, when a lull in the customers allowed, he stood and approached the counter. "Clara," he said softly. She looked up, startled slightly by the use of her name. Few customers knew it. "Yes, sir," she replied, smiling politely. "I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice calm but sincere, "that I've noticed the way you treat people here. You have a remarkable way of making everyone feel important, seen, and respected." Clara's cheeks flushed slightly. Compliments were nice, but this one felt different. It was genuine, thoughtful, and heartfelt. "Thank you," she said softly, unsure of what else to say. "I just try to do my best." Arthur smiled, a small, quiet smile that held more meaning than words could convey. "And it shows. I wanted to acknowledge it, even in this small way. You make this place better, not just with coffee, but with your heart. Clara felt a warmth spreading inside her chest. She wasn't used to such direct appreciation from strangers. It wasn't about recognition for her work. It was about seeing the value in the small things she did every day. She nodded, touched, but tried to remain composed. "That's very kind of you to say, sir," she replied. The days passed and their small exchanges became more frequent. Arthur sometimes lingered longer, making small talk about the weather, the city, or the simple joys of life. Clara responded naturally, never questioning the depth of his observations, unaware of the life he had lived, the experiences that shaped him, and the wealth he quietly carried. She shared small pieces of her own life, stories of her family, her dreams, her challenges, and her everyday struggles. Arthur listened, genuinely interested, never interrupting, offering insight only when it seemed appropriate. One morning, as Clara was wiping down the counter, she noticed Arthur helping a young boy retrieve a dropped toy. The boy's mother looked on with gratitude, and Arthur returned the toy with a gentle smile. Clara watched from a distance, impressed not by the action itself but by the way he did it, with kindness, without showing off, without seeking acknowledgement. The gesture mirrored her own philosophy. Small acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. As weeks turned into months, a silent bond formed between them, built not on words, but on shared observations, mutual respect, and an understanding of the quiet power of small gestures. Arthur had never sought to reveal his wealth or influence. To him, it was irrelevant in this space. What mattered was the human connection, the authenticity of Clara's heart, and the way she moved through the world with grace and empathy. He began to consider her in a new light, not as a waitress in a small coffee shop, but as someone with potential, someone whose character could impact more lives than she realized. He thought about the ways he could help without diminishing her independence, without making her feel patronized. And slowly, subtly, he started planning how he might introduce an opportunity to her, a way to expand her life beyond the walls of the coffee shop, without altering the genuine nature of who she was. Clara, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the influence she had on him. She focused on her work, on helping the customers, on managing the flow of the shop, and on being a steady presence for those who walked through the door. Each act of kindness, each smile, each patient gesture was natural to her. She didn't see it as extraordinary. It was simply who she was. Yet for Arthur, every day spent watching her, interacting with her and witnessing her quiet strength, reinforced his admiration and deepened his resolve to show appreciation in a meaningful way. The rainy days turned into sunny ones. The season shifted, and the coffee shop remained a haven for both regulars and newcomers. Clara continued her work, unassuming yet impactful, while Arthur observed with a quiet gratitude, seeing in her actions the embodiment of the values he held dear: compassion, humility, and integrity. It was a relationship built not on status or wealth, but on the simple, profound understanding that kindness, when genuine, could leave a lasting impression. And so the days continued. Each cup of coffee served carrying with it the potential for small miracles, each interaction reinforcing the delicate thread that was weaving their lives together. Neither fully understood the significance of these quiet moments yet, but the foundation was being laid, a foundation that would soon lead to conversations, revelations, and a connection that neither of them could have anticipated, a connection that would ultimately change both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. Starting from the simple act of kindness that had first brought them together, the morning started quietly in the coffee shop, with sunlight spilling through the windows and reflecting off the polished surfaces. Clara arrived early, tying her apron with precision and taking a deep breath of the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The sound of soft chatter and clinking cups filled the shop as the regulars arrived, greeting her with smiles and nods. Yet amidst all the familiar faces, her eyes sought the one presence that had recently become quietly significant in her life: the elderly man who had touched her heart with his quiet gratitude weeks ago. Arthur entered as usual, calm and composed, carrying a small leather bag over his shoulder. The bell above the door jingled softly, announcing his arrival. He moved deliberately toward the counter, his eyes taking in the warm, bustling space of the coffee shop. Clara noticed him immediately and returned his gentle smile with one of her own. There was no need for words. A silent recognition passed between them. She prepared his usual coffee with the attention and care that had become instinctive, arranging the sugar and napkins just as he liked. When she handed it to him, he accepted it with a quiet nod and a look of gratitude that seemed to carry more meaning than the simple words could express. Over the next few days, their interactions deepened subtly. Arthur began staying a little longer, sometimes reading quietly, sometimes observing the people around him with keen interest. Clara, while tending to the morning rush, noticed the little ways he interacted with the environment. He offered a warm smile to a harried parent, quietly helped a child pick up a fallen napkin, and shared small jokes with other regulars. She began to sense that there was more to him than the elderly man who came in for coffee. There was wisdom in his eyes, a depth she could not quite name, but that somehow commanded respect and admiration. One afternoon, as the shop settled into a calm lull, Arthur approached the counter. His movements were deliberate, almost hesitant, as if he were carefully choosing the right moment to speak. "Clara," he said softly, catching her attention. She looked up, slightly startled by the personal use of her name. "Yes, sir," she replied, a polite smile on her face. "I've been observing something," he began, his voice calm and thoughtful. "It's not just the way you serve coffee. It's the way you treat people. The little gestures, the smiles, the patience. It's remarkable." Clara's cheeks flushed slightly. Compliments were nothing new, but the sincerity in his tone made her feel something deeper. She nodded quietly, unsure of how to respond. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just try to do my best." Arthur's eyes softened. "And it shows. I wanted to let you know that, because it's rare to find someone who genuinely cares about others the way you do." Clara felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She wasn't used to being acknowledged for the heart behind her actions. Usually people thanked her for efficiency or service, not for genuine kindness. She nodded, touched, and returned to her work, though her mind lingered on his words. There was something different about him, something that made ordinary words feel significant. Days turned into weeks, and a subtle rhythm formed between them. Arthur continued to frequent the coffee shop, always selecting his usual seat by the window, quietly observing life and watching Clara interact with the customers. Clara continued her work with the same diligence and warmth, unaware of the profound impact her small acts of kindness were having on Arthur. She shared bits of her life in passing, the struggle of balancing work with her family obligations, her dreams of one day owning a small cafe, her joys in the little things, and the occasional frustrations that came with her job. Arthur listened attentively, responding occasionally with thoughtful questions or observations that encouraged her to reflect and share more. One rainy morning, the shop was quieter than usual, and the soft patter of rain against the windows created a soothing background. Clara moved between the tables, refilling drinks and checking on customers, her movements graceful and effortless. Arthur remained at his usual spot, sipping his coffee, his eyes following her as she interacted with the patrons. He noticed the small, almost imperceptible ways she made each person feel valued. A reassuring word, a gentle smile, a patient ear. To him, it wasn't just service, it was an embodiment of something far greater, something rare and precious. When the rush slowed, Arthur approached the counter again. "Clara," he said, his voice low and sincere. She looked up, curious and slightly apprehensive. "Yes," she responded. "I've been thinking," he began, pausing to find the right words. "You have a gift, a way of touching people's lives through simple actions. It's rare, and it's something the world needs more of." Clara listened, her heart fluttering slightly. She had always believed in the power of small gestures, but hearing someone recognize it in such a meaningful way was new to her. I just try to be kind," she said softly. "I don't think of it as a gift. It's just what I do." Arthur smiled, a quiet smile that carried warmth and admiration. "That's exactly what makes it special. Kindness that comes naturally without expectation has a profound impact. You have the ability to make a real difference, and I hope you never underestimate that." Clara felt a mix of surprise and humility. She was not accustomed to receiving such heartfelt acknowledgement, and it left her feeling both inspired and self-conscious. She nodded, unsure of how to respond, but deeply touched nonetheless. Over the following weeks, Arthur continued to visit the shop, often lingering longer, observing. and occasionally engaging in conversation. He shared little stories from his past, not about wealth or fame, but about lessons learned, moments of kindness he had witnessed, and the quiet joys he had found in unexpected places. Clara listened intently, captivated by his stories and the wisdom that seemed to flow effortlessly from him. She found herself looking forward to his visits, not for the coffee, but for the conversations, the subtle guidance, and the shared understanding of life's simple yet profound moments. One day, as Clara was arranging pastries on the display counter, Arthur approached with a small, gentle smile.
"Clara," he said, catching her attention.
She looked up, surprised by the tone of familiarity in his voice. "Yes?" she replied, curiosity piqued. "I wanted to ask you something," he began. "Would you allow me to take you to lunch sometime? No reason, really, just to continue our conversation and get to know each other a little better." Clara hesitated, caught off guard. It was an unusual request from a customer, but there was something genuine in his manner, something that inspired trust. She nodded slowly. "I suppose that would be nice," she said, her voice soft but accepting. The lunch was set for the following week. Clara arrived at the small, quiet restaurant, curious and slightly apprehensive. Arthur was already there, seated at a corner table that offered a sense of privacy. He greeted her with the same warm, understated smile that had become familiar over their weeks of interaction. They exchanged pleasantries, settling into a comfortable rhythm of conversation that felt surprisingly natural for two people who had only recently begun to know each other. Arthur shared stories from his life, not of wealth or luxury, but of experiences, lessons and observations that carried a quiet depth. Clara spoke of her dreams, her family, and the small moments that brought her joy or frustration. The conversation flowed easily, a mixture of humor, reflection, and shared humanity. Each story, each laugh, and each thoughtful exchange deepened the connection between them, forming a bond that was quiet yet profound. By the end of the lunch, Clara felt a sense of inspiration she had not anticipated. Arthur's presence, his words, and his genuine interest in her perspective had left a lasting impression. She realized that kindness, when recognized and encouraged, could ripple outward, inspiring confidence, courage, and a renewed sense of possibility. Arthur, for his part, felt a growing admiration for Clara, not for her position or circumstances, but for the integrity, empathy, and warmth that defined her character. As they parted ways that afternoon, neither fully understood the significance of their interaction. Clara returned to the coffee shop with a renewed sense of purpose, feeling both humbled and inspired. Arthur returned to his life, quietly contemplating the rare qualities he had witnessed in her, the potential he sensed, and the desire to support her growth in a meaningful way. Their relationship, built on observation, shared experiences, and genuine respect, was quietly evolving into something extraordinary, a connection that would soon lead to opportunities, revelations, and a deep bond that neither had anticipated, all beginning from the simple act of kindness that had first brought them together. The coffee shop was bathed in the golden light of a late morning sun, the windows casting long, warm patterns on the polished wooden floor. Clara moved with her usual grace and purpose, greeting customers with her soft smile and attentive presence. Each order she took, each cup she poured, carried the quiet care that had always defined her approach. Yet beneath the routine there was a sense of anticipation that had begun to settle into her days, subtle but persistent. It was not for a customer or an event, but a feeling she could not quite name. Arthur arrived as he had become accustomed, quietly entering the shop with a calm dignity that set him apart from the usual bustle. His eyes scanned the room with a gentle attentiveness, and when they met Clara's, a subtle exchange of acknowledgement passed between them. Today, though, there was a difference in his demeanor. He seemed more contemplative, as though weighing something important, something that had been on his mind for weeks. Clara prepared his coffee as usual, instinctively adding just the right amount of cream and sugar without being asked. When she handed it to him, he accepted it with a quiet nod, his eyes reflecting a depth of thought. He moved toward his usual table by the window, settling into the familiar spot that had become a quiet sanctuary for both observation and reflection. Clara continued her work behind the counter, occasionally glancing toward him, sensing that this morning might carry a significance beyond the ordinary. Throughout the week, their interactions remained subtle but increasingly meaningful. Arthur observed not only Clara's interactions with customers, but also her moments of reflection, her quiet gestures of thoughtfulness, and the way she managed the small challenges of her work with patience and grace. He noticed how she encouraged a young couple trying to navigate the menu, how she comforted a child who had spilled a drink, and how she quietly assisted her coworkers when the rush grew overwhelming. Each action reinforced his admiration, revealing a character that was rare and deeply compelling. One afternoon, when the shop was quieter than usual and the soft light of the setting sun filled the room, Arthur approached the counter. His movements were deliberate, measured, as though he were preparing for a conversation that required care and thought. Clara looked up, meeting his gaze with curiosity and a gentle smile. "Yes, sir?" she asked, unaware of the weight behind his words. "I've been meaning to speak with you," he began, his voice calm and sincere. "I've watched the way you carry yourself, the way you treat the people around you, and I feel compelled to say something more than just a casual compliment. You have a remarkable gift, Clara, a way of touching lives that is both rare and valuable." Clara's heart fluttered slightly. She was unaccustomed to being acknowledged in such a meaningful way. I just try to be kind," she replied softly. "It's nothing special." Arthur shook his head gently. "That's exactly what makes it special. Kindness that comes without expectation, without performance, is the most impactful. You have the ability to influence the world around you in ways you may not even realize, and I want to help you see that potential for yourself." Clara felt a mix of surprise and humility. The notion that her simple actions could carry such significance was both inspiring and overwhelming. She nodded slowly, trying to process the depth of his words. "I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. "I've never thought of it like that." Arthur's eyes held a quiet intensity. "You don't need to say anything right now. Just understand that what you do matters and that sometimes life presents opportunities to expand your reach and impact in ways that can be transformative. I would like to offer you such an opportunity, if you are willing to consider it." Clara was both intrigued and apprehensive. The idea of opportunity was exciting, yet also daunting. She had lived her life within familiar boundaries, working hard to support herself and her family, managing the everyday challenges of her job with diligence and care. The notion that someone might offer a path to something greater was almost surreal. I would like to hear more," she said finally, her voice tentative but curious. Arthur nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. "Very well. Let's discuss it further. Not here, though. It requires privacy and focus, away from the interruptions of the coffee shop. Would you allow me to take you somewhere quiet to talk?" After a brief pause, Clara agreed, feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The next day, they met at a small, understated restaurant known for its quiet atmosphere and unhurried service. The space offered an intimacy that allowed for open conversation without distraction. Arthur greeted her warmly, guiding her to a corner table bathed in soft light. The environment felt safe and calm, a perfect setting for the meaningful dialogue that was about to unfold. They began with light conversation, easing into the exchange with gentle humor and shared observations about life. Clara spoke of her experiences at the coffee shop, the challenges she faced, and the small joys that sustained her. Arthur listened attentively, occasionally interjecting with thoughtful questions that encouraged deeper reflection. He shared insights from his own life, not about wealth or status, but about values, lessons, and the importance of recognizing and nurturing the gifts that each person possesses. As the conversation progressed, Arthur shifted toward a more focused discussion. "Clara," he said softly, "you have a vision within you even if you don't fully recognize it yet. A desire to create, to inspire, and to bring comfort and joy to others. I want to help you realize that vision. There are resources, guidance, and opportunities that can enable you to expand your influence and impact in ways that go beyond what you currently imagine." Clara listened with rapt attention, a mixture of excitement and cautious skepticism filling her mind. She had dreams, yes, but they had always been tempered by practicality and the limitations of her circumstances. The idea that someone would recognize her potential and offer support was both thrilling and intimidating. I don't know what to say," she admitted. "It sounds wonderful, but also overwhelming." Arthur's expression was calm, reassuring. "You don't need to say anything right now. Just understand that the opportunity is genuine, and that it comes not from obligation, but from recognition of your character and potential. I've seen the way you move through life, the way you touch others, and I believe that you can do even more with the right guidance and support." He outlined a plan, a gradual, thoughtful approach that would allow Clara to explore possibilities without overwhelming her. Training, mentorship, and access to resources would be provided, all designed to empower her while respecting her values and independence. Clara absorbed the information, her mind racing with possibilities, fears, and hopes. She realized that this was a turning point, a rare chance to expand her life in ways she had only dreamed of but never dared to pursue. Over the next several days, Clara reflected on the conversation. She weighed the opportunity against her current life, her responsibilities, and her dreams. Each thought brought both excitement and apprehension. She considered the impact she could have, the ways she could touch more lives, and the personal growth she might experience. And through it all, she returned to the simple truth that had guided her for years: her desire to help others, to make a difference, and to approach life with kindness and integrity. Finally, she made her decision. She would embrace the opportunity, not because it promised wealth or status, but because it aligned with her values and offered a path to expand the impact of her heart. She approached Arthur at the coffee shop one morning, her resolve firm but her voice gentle. "I've thought about what you said," she began, "and I want to move forward. I'm ready to explore what's possible." Arthur's eyes reflected quiet satisfaction, a mix of admiration and relief. "I'm glad," he said simply. "We will proceed carefully, step by step, ensuring that the path honors your principles and vision. This is not about changing who you are, but amplifying the goodness you already carry within you." With that, their collaboration began. Clara embarked on a journey that would challenge her, inspire her, and allow her to expand the reach of her kindness. Arthur provided guidance, encouragement, and practical support, always respecting her independence and judgment. The relationship evolved naturally, rooted in mutual respect, trust, and a shared understanding of the value of character and integrity. Through it all, the coffee shop remained a grounding presence, a reminder of where it all began. Each cup served, each conversation held, each small act of kindness continued to shape their connection and reinforce the importance of the human heart in all endeavors. And while the future remained uncertain, both Clara and Arthur understood that the choices they were making were guided by something timeless: the quiet, powerful impact of genuine kindness and the belief that small gestures could create extraordinary change. The morning sun filtered softly through the windows of the coffee shop, painting the room in warm golden hues. Clara moved through the space with her usual attentiveness, greeting each customer with a smile and ensuring that every order was prepared with care. Yet today her steps carried a quiet sense of anticipation. She felt it in the gentle flutter of her chest, in the way her mind lingered on the possibilities that lay ahead, the opportunities that had begun to unfold after weeks of subtle guidance and conversations with Arthur. Arthur arrived shortly after, entering the shop as quietly and deliberately as always. The bell above the door announced his presence, and Clara's eyes met his with a warm recognition that had grown familiar over time. Today, however, there was a subtle difference in the air. He seemed to carry a quiet excitement, tempered by the calm confidence that had always defined him. There was a sense that today marked a turning point, a moment that would leave a lasting imprint on both their lives. Clara prepared his usual coffee with practiced care, arranging the cup just so, adding the precise amount of cream and sugar he preferred, and setting it gently on the counter. He accepted it with a nod of gratitude and moved toward his usual spot by the window. Clara returned to her work, attending to other customers, but her thoughts frequently drifted back to him. She sensed that something significant was about to unfold, though she could not yet name what it might be. Over the following days, their interactions continued to deepen in subtle, meaningful ways. Arthur observed Clara with the same quiet attentiveness, noting how she moved through the space with empathy and grace, how she lifted the spirits of both customers and co-workers, and how her presence seemed to infuse the shop with a sense of warmth and calm. He was not merely impressed by her efficiency or skill, but by the integrity and kindness that infused every action she took. Clara, for her part, found herself reflecting more and more on her interactions with him. She considered the lessons embedded in their conversations, the insights he offered, and the encouragement he provided. She realized that his presence had a way of amplifying her awareness, helping her to see the value in her actions, the potential within herself, and the broader possibilities that lay beyond the confines of her daily routine. She felt inspired, challenged, and quietly motivated to explore paths she had never dared to consider. One afternoon, when the shop was particularly quiet and the soft hum of conversation provided a gentle backdrop, Arthur approached the counter. Clara looked up, curiosity and a quiet anticipation flickering across her features. "Clara?" he said softly, his voice carrying a calm intensity. "Yes, sir?" she replied, her voice gentle but attentive. "I'd like to take the next step with you," he said, pausing to ensure the weight of his words settled. "We've discussed possibilities, potential, and growth, but now I want to provide you with the resources and support to make those possibilities tangible. I want to help you create a place where your kindness and vision can flourish, where your impact can reach beyond the immediate surroundings of this coffee shop." Clara felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The idea was thrilling, yet daunting. She had always dreamed of owning her own cafe, a space where she could combine her love of people, coffee, and community. But the prospect of making that dream a reality felt distant and almost unreachable. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I want that," she said softly. "I've always dreamed of it, but I didn't know how it could happen." Arthur smiled, a quiet, approving smile that carried reassurance. "And now it can. Not through shortcuts or handouts, but through careful planning, guidance, and support. We will proceed step by step, ensuring that your vision remains authentic, that it reflects your values, and that it empowers you to create the impact you desire." He outlined a detailed plan over the next few weeks. Clara would receive mentorship in managing a business, guidance on operational strategies, and support in securing the necessary resources to launch her cafe. Importantly, the approach emphasized autonomy and integrity, ensuring that she would remain the driving force behind her vision, while benefiting from the knowledge, experience, and encouragement that Arthur could provide. Clara listened intently, absorbing every detail, her mind racing with possibilities, challenges, and hopes. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation and learning. Clara met with advisors, explored potential locations, and began to understand the intricacies of running a business. She discovered the importance of budgeting, supplier relationships, staffing, and customer experience. Each lesson, each challenge strengthened her resolve and deepened her understanding of the responsibility and opportunity she had been entrusted with. She realized that this journey was not simply about creating a cafe. It was about shaping a space where her values, kindness, and vision could manifest in a tangible way that would touch countless lives. Throughout this period, Arthur remained a steady presence. He offered guidance when needed, provided encouragement during moments of uncertainty, and quietly celebrated Clara's achievements. Their interactions, once simple and observational, had evolved into a partnership rooted in respect, trust, and a shared commitment to making a positive difference. Clara found herself inspired not only by the practical support he provided, but by the way he modeled thoughtful leadership, humility, and genuine care for others. One evening, after a long day of planning and discussions, Clara sat alone in the coffee shop, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. The quiet hum of the shop and the fading light created a space for introspection. She thought about the small act of kindness that had sparked the initial connection with Arthur, the simple gesture of paying for a cup of coffee. She marveled at how that moment, seemingly insignificant at the time, had set in motion a series of events that had the potential to transform her life. It was a reminder of the profound ripple effect that genuine kindness could create, touching lives in ways that were often unseen and unexpected. The grand opening of her cafe approached, and Clara felt a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration. She had poured herself into the preparations, guided by her vision and the support she had received. The space was modest but inviting, reflecting her personality, values, and attention to detail. Every element, from the layout to the choice of coffee blends, had been thoughtfully selected to create an environment of warmth, community, and comfort. She envisioned patrons not just enjoying their drinks but feeling welcomed, valued, and cared for in the way she had always strived to make others feel. On the morning of the opening, Clara arrived early to make final adjustments, ensuring everything was perfect. The first customers began to arrive, drawn by curiosity, the reputation of the shop, and word-of-mouth excitement. Clara greeted each person with the same genuine warmth that had characterized her approach from the beginning. She moved through the space with a combination of efficiency and attentiveness, balancing operational tasks with personal engagement, her presence radiating care and authenticity. Arthur arrived quietly, choosing a spot from which he could observe without intruding. He watched as Clara interacted with the customers, noting the seamless way she balanced business acumen with compassion. He saw the joy she brought to the patrons, the way she remembered details about their lives, and the way she infused each interaction with kindness and attentiveness. He felt a quiet pride, not in the realization of her success alone, but in the recognition of the person she had always been, the same kind, thoughtful, and genuine individual who had touched his heart weeks ago with the simplest of gestures. As the day progressed, the cafe buzzed with life, laughter, and conversation. Patrons lingered over drinks, exchanged stories, and formed connections, all within the welcoming space Clara had created. She moved among them with the same grace and attentiveness, her heart full of gratitude and a quiet sense of accomplishment. The journey that had begun with a single act of kindness had grown into something far greater, a testament to the power of compassion, opportunity, and human connection. As the evening approached and the last customers departed, Clara and Arthur shared a quiet moment in the empty cafe. The soft glow of the lights reflected off the polished surfaces, creating an atmosphere of warmth and serenity. Clara turned to him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and joy. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice carrying the depth of emotion she felt. "I couldn't have done this without you." Arthur shook his head, a gentle smile on his face. "No, Clara, this was always yours. I only provided guidance and support. You created this from your heart, your kindness, and your vision. I only helped you see what you were capable of." Clara realized that the journey had been about more than coffee or a business. It had been about understanding the value of her own character, the impact of small acts of kindness, and the power of vision guided by integrity. She understood that life's opportunities often arose from the simplest gestures, that genuine care for others could open doors in ways that were unexpected and profound. In the quiet of the closing day, they stood together, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The connection that had started with a simple cup of coffee had grown into a partnership, a journey of growth, opportunity, and human connection. Clara knew that her cafe was more than just a business. It was a reflection of her heart, her values, and her commitment to making the world a little warmer, one act of kindness at a time. And for Arthur, the true reward was witnessing the unfolding of someone's potential, nurtured not by wealth but by recognition, support, and the quiet power of human goodness. Months had passed since Clara had opened her cafe, and the space had flourished into a beloved community hub. Customers came not only for the coffee but for the warmth, attention, and kindness that permeated every corner. Clara moved through the shop with the same grace and attentiveness she always had, yet there was a new layer to her presence, a quiet confidence born from experience, growth, and the realization that her vision had become tangible. She had navigated challenges, learned lessons, and witnessed the impact of her work on others, all while remaining true to her values. Arthur continued to visit regularly, though he never imposed. He often observed quietly from his usual spot, taking note of how Clara interacted with her team, how she resolved minor challenges with calm authority, and how her empathy extended beyond customers to her employees. She had built a team that mirrored her ethos, a group of individuals who were motivated not only by the business, but by the culture she had cultivated. The cafe had become a living testament to the ripple effect of kindness and thoughtful leadership. One crisp morning,